It's Late Night Pod Talk with your host, Studio Steve.
Well, hey, pod tractors and podiatricians. Welcome to Late Night Pod Talk. I'm your host, Studio Steve, and I'm stoked tonight, people. And let me tell you why. We have an awesome guest, Eric Hunley from the Unstructured podcast. Eric is an expert interviewer. Since he launched his show a little over a year ago, he has interviewed some 150 insanely cool guests. Tonight, I've asked him to come on and pod talk with us about interviewing. So let's bring him on.
Eric Hunley.
Well, hey there, Eric. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a total honor being here. I love what you're doing, and I think it's of total value to the community.
Well, thank you. And tonight on Pod Talk, I wanted to pick your brain about interviewing. First off, I know there are many styles of interviewing and even psychological approaches behind it. How can we decide how to conduct our interviews with guests?
Well, there's different ways that you can go about it, but your ultimate goal is to, it sounds terrible, but open them up. And I am always thinking, how can I ask a particular question or have a certain attitude that'll get them to respond and just be truthful? Doesn't even have to be warm. Now, some methodologies that are out there is like Mark Maron famously draws a vision about how he sees the person. And we all do that. When we see somebody, we visualize who we think they are. Well, then he verbalizes it to their face and essentially tests his theory. And so we find out that, oh, yay, he's right, or no, he's not actually right. And then his vision is shaped. But this makes for an interesting interview because there's a little tension.
The tension and the conflict.
Exactly. And I have gone that way in different interviews. So I try to get a read on how people respond and then act in a manner to get that back.
Okay, cool. Now, I'm sure when you're preparing for an interview, most of us would at first obviously think of writing down some questions or talking points. But what else can we think about in the preparation stages that will help us be ready and have a good interview?
Why do you care? That is the first question you have to ask. Why do you want this person on your show? What is it that compels you? A booking agent sent them to you. Well, okay. How is that interesting? Why do you care? So go from that angle. What is it? What is it about this person that kind of fascinates you or that you're curious about? Like somebody who's into a polygamous lifestyle and relationship. Well, how does your spouse feel about that? I'd want to know. These things are what makes it. So instead of just worrying about the script or the product or whatever, what is it about the person that fascinates you? What is it that you turned up while you're researching? Be curious and pretend you're listening at the same time as you're interviewing. And it's very difficult, but I'm always trying to think, ask this. Have you ever listened to an interview and you're like, well, what about that? Or what about this? I try to think of the question that the audience may have, but obviously they can't ask, but I'm right there. And if I don't ask that question, maybe I at least ask another question that's equally compelling or interesting.
Wow, that just seems so complicated.
It's a dance. It is a very difficult dance in your mind.
Wow. So, I couldn't talk with Eric Hunley without hearing some of your ideas about researching our upcoming guests.
I'm a big believer in research for multiple reasons. One, it's a security blanket. The fact that you have a list of questions to ask that you've really spent some time on, you've paid attention to what they've said. So you actually know who they are to a pretty good degree. Another thing that is important about it is I feel like it respects your guest. There is nothing more satisfying than if a host asks you a question and you're going, where'd you get that? Or, wow, you dug deep. You really paid attention. You care enough about me to go find this out. And you'd be surprised. And they lighten up. Now they're involved. This is a cool conversation.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So I guess really like most things, it's best just to get started. Get out there and start interviewing.
Yes. And you will start to feel a bit more of a rhythm and a pattern. And you don't have to do obsessive research like I do. You could be Larry King. Larry King is someone who's just very curious. They give him the name of the person and what they do, and he just runs from that.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that work? Why? What are you doing? And you're a pilot. Are you afraid you'll crash? and whatever comes to mind. But find your style, find your voice.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, I think that, there's obviously I could just keep picking your brain and we can keep talking for hours on this, but I think that's a good place to start. And then as we're finishing up, I just wanted to ask you, I know you mentioned that you're going to be speaking at MAPCON.
Yes, September 6th to 7th. MAPCON is in Atlantic City. So especially those who are on the East Coast, please come check it out. It's very cool. There's a lot of us. They're short sessions, but what's really neat about the conference is Super Joe Pardo. Got to put the super in. He's a good guy. He put it together by having shorter sessions. Everybody is in one room.
Oh,
so
wow.
Instead of having to choose this session or that session, or while I'm speaking, I can't obviously be watching somebody else. Everybody is in the same room. All the speakers, all the attendees, one big family, and everybody sees everything. And I think it's a really smart move.
Man, I wish I could make it out to Atlantic City to see that. I'm jealous.
Maybe you can.
Yeah, maybe I can. I need to get away from these kids. They're killing me. Well, and that wraps it up for Pod Talk tonight. Thanks so much for stopping by, Eric.
You guys are doing great stuff.
We are, aren't we?